Hi everybody, it's Tiffany Wolfe back with Warm Embers. I took a short break, came back. It's 2025, and my first guest of the year is the amazing Andrea Jenkins. We worked together at an Indian health clinic back in the day. I was in the admin part of the departments, and Andrea was with the community health. So she has a master's degree in science, RDN, CD, CES. So I'm going to let her do her introduction and she's going to tell you about that. So thank you, Andrea, for being here.
Thank you, Tiffany. I feel very honored that you've asked me to be a part of Warm Embers. It touches my heart so much. Yeah, just to have a little bit of chit chat and face-to-face time.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you.
Thank you.
So, my name is Andrea, and I am the daughter of Jim and Mary Jenkins. And on my maternal side, we're from the Seminole Nation of Oklahoma. And of the 16 bands, we are of the Tuskegee Harjo band. And my grandmother was the great granddaughter of the chief of the nation, which is the Holbutta side, as well as the chief of the band, which is the Tuskegee side. So I really do feel so proud of my heritage. It is the side of my family that I know.
That is awesome. And in September, Andrea's going to come back and tell us more about her family history because it is it's a great story. And I think that is worth sharing because we can all connect on that. So would you want to tell us about your acronyms?
Sure. So first thing I do want to say, and that is the education that I have, I owe to my grandmother. She made sure that her children went to school. And that was a time when kids weren't really forced to go to school, and she made sure her children were there. And my mom did not go to college until she had her first daughter, which was my sister. And my sister wasn't going to go to college, and my mom told her, "Yes, we are. We're going to go together." And so my oldest sister and my mom went to college together, and the two of them always encouraged me. And so I do owe that down the line.
That's beautiful. That matriarch right there.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. So I went to junior college in Fresno and junior college at Cuesta, which is in San Luis Obispo. And then I did my bachelor's at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. And then I did 2 master's programs in Mississippi at Mississippi State University. One master's in nutrition, and the other one was in education. And at the same time, while I was doing that, I did my dietetic internship, and I worked WIC. And I'm not sure really how I did all that.
So done.
So I am a registered dietitian, and I'm also a certified diabetes care and education specialist. When I was studying in school, diabetes was not something that I was highly interested in. And yet, as soon as you're forced out into the world, you realize you better learn about diabetes because it really impacts people of the US and many other countries. So I became a certified diabetes care and education specialist after I left working with the tribes, and I started working with another federally qualified healthcare facility called Community Health Centers.
Wow. Yes, that is such a good journey. Like, I think working in nutrition would be so fun because of all of your clients and just you're helping so many people. So I think that would be such a great career.
When I was trying to get into a dietetic internship, because that was at the time the only pathway to become a dietitian. There's been some changes now through the Commission on Dietetic Registration, but there was really a very, very limited pathway and not very many programs. So now they have expanded the pathways and they've expanded the number of programs. So that has helped, but I think part of why that is there really weren't very many dietitians. Now I live in an area where there's 2 dietetic internships, so I feel like they're turning them out left and right. And a new requirement that just started this year, sorry, 2025, is that every dietitian is registered dietitian is now required to have their master's degree.
Okay, that makes sense. Education is so important. Just because somebody reads a report, they don't always, it needs to, you have to have like several people reading that and reviewing it. So, yeah.
Yeah, interpretation is big.
Yes. And environmental, one of the big sayings is what is it? Um, Correlation is not causation.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
So there are a ton of observational studies, and then when those are printed, that's the stuff that makes it into the news very quickly, and people pick that up and then they run with it, and it's like, well, that really isn't a cause, cause and effect kind of thing. So understanding that when you're reading research information can help people not go off on these tangents that haven't been proven yet.
Exactly. That's why it's important to do your homework and do your
Yeah.
studies. Okay, Andrea. So, with your expertise and years of knowledge, can you tell us about trends you've seen during your career?
Over several decades, which that sounds so strange to say, but over several decades, I've seen all kinds of different diets. Whole Foods, 30/30, South Beach. I really cannot even keep track of all of the trends. And they really go viral when a doctor writes the book. So it can be very interesting. Some stuff, though, that's trending right now that's very exciting is sustainability of farming and quality of farming. That's been interesting. Probably going to be driving the cost of food up, which none of us want to hear. But we do know that the quality of farming impacts our food. And then also the gut microbiome is really big right now. A lot of research is coming out in that area. And I think we're going to continue to see more about the gut microbiome. And then also, I don't know specifically if it's about nutrition as a diet per se, but about our physical being that many Americans are suffering with sarcopenia, and that with an aging population is it's not good. And so, how do we prevent sarcopenia? That's a big realm, and that's a big realm in the world of bariatrics as well as people that use the GLP-1 medication. So, there's lots of trends going on in nutrition.
Yeah, always popping. So I'm on when I'm watching YouTube videos, I get the ads, and it's so funny because yesterday there was this doctor and she was like, "Oh, there's this secret that I can tell you about all of my patients, blah blah blah." And I was like, "What is this secret?" And it was like 3 minutes later, she's still talking about the secret, and I'm like, "Oh, she's trying to sell me something." And I'm like, doctor,
Yeah,
but you're so right. Like when you hear some, and we don't even know if they're doctors, really, they could be
right.
doctors. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's so funny. Just the capitalism wheel, that's part of it. Just selling something.
Yes,
Um,
capitalism that plays off of desperation.
yes, I have been there. So to discuss what I like about nutrition and the education behind it, coming from growing up with poverty foods like commodities,
Mm-hmm.
just like food stamps, quick eating, like whatever's available in the grocery store, whatever was on sale. My mother, who passed away from arterial sclerosis, like stroke, but she like would eat like the chicken gullets or whatever you call it. I don't know, but that was her one
Yeah,
thing. She loved those things.
the
And they
gizzard.
Yes, they cannot have been good for you. I'm just like, oh my gosh. But they were like, I remember they were like 79 cents for a big pack of it, and she
Mm-hmm.
would go and get it and they were fried. And then under the hot lamp, we eat those, and it's just in Indian country. I know our nutrition, like the traditional foods, fry bread, which is fried in who knows what kind of oil, right?
I
And
know, so good.
then the beef, ground beef.
Mm-hmm.
Are they draining the fat? We don't know. But yeah, not that. I mean, I'm not knocking it because I'm thankful for it. That's part of our culture. But at the same time, it's like, what is that doing to our artery?
No, it's true. I mean, food commodities, they started out because people were forced into barren lands where they couldn't grow and raise the foods that they did before, squash and corn and potatoes. So now when you can't grow your food, and if you are unable to do that, and now people are going to starve to death, then here comes the US government to save everybody with government cheese, you know? And so, yeah, it creates its own issues. So I guess the options were starving to death
Uh-huh.
or, you know, getting assistance. And it's interesting because then over time, we find an affinity for those foods. I love Indian fried bread. Don't take it
Yeah,
away.
no, I do too. But I'm like, okay, just every now and then now, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely.
I know. And then the other thing, oh, with the what is it? Micro gut biome or what? That's not how.
the micro the microbiome of the gut.
Yes, there we
Absolutely.
go. Okay, so
Yeah.
I'm into like reading about spirituality and healing and like and part of that is the gut biome. I didn't look into it that part because I'm like, I don't want pseudoscience, kind of thing. And I didn't have
Mhm.
time to really look into it. But they were saying like the that's part of like emotional response that could have an impact on your whole body. So what do you think? What are your
Yeah. So it's interesting. I like the topic, and I'm still learning a lot about the topic because there's still a lot of brand new research.
yeah.
There are trillions of bacteria in our body that can weigh up to 2 to 5 pounds and function as its own organ. And there's 1,000 different species, and they impact our health from cardiovascular, weight, diabetes type 1 and 2, as well as mental health. And that's the part I think where a lot of people are very interested in the mental health aspect.
Wow, 2 to 5 pounds. That is
Yeah,
so interesting. Wow,
it
I
is.
just like, dang, that's so cool. But yeah, so
And
there's more research on it that's coming out, or
oh, yeah, there's tons of research coming out on it, especially in the world of obesity and bariatrics right now. I know there's a lot being presented there and in mental health. They did some twin studies and they looked at twins and they what they're coming from that study is that they're saying that genetics plays less of an impact on the gut microbiome as it does environment. So what are we eating? What are we doing? What are we being exposed to? That change.
wow.
Mm-hmm.
That is fascinating because we're coming from an environmental field. We always are looking at like what are they putting in the water? What are they putting in the air? What's going on? If like brownfields where people are usually industry and corporations are always trying to find a way to offload their waste products, and it usually ends up getting somebody sick, and then we have regulation.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how a lot of our EPA regulation came to be, is that it is in a response to something that's already happened. So, but that's what, you're familiar with that too.
Yeah,
So,
reactionary. I agree with you. Mm-hmm.
yeah. So if we're coming from environmental field, we're always like, what is causing this? We want to make sure we're creating a healthy environment for people.
Well, and with so much processing, that's a big part of, people had to process and preserve food previously because there wasn't really a way to store and preserve food. And so that's where some processing comes in. And now we've taken it to the far extreme. We know that excessive consumption of processed, particularly like beef and bacon and sausage and bologna and hot dogs and a lot of things that many of us have grown up on,
Yeah.
that really shouldn't be a staple of our diet.
Yes, like the Costco hot dog. I did not re Oh my gosh, it's so funny. So I did not realize how carcinogenic they can be because of the nitrates. And then and someone in my family got cancer, and then the doctor was like, stop eating all of these foods with nitrates in it because it's not healthy for you. And then you really go down and start really looking at all the ingredients and stuff. But we would buy hot dogs for our dogs because they were like 79 cents. And then my son one day, because we never ate them, but we kept them for the dogs. And we just like, because they loved them so much. It's just like get them to do tricks,
I was
like
gonna say training treat.
exactly. Exactly. And my son's like, what would happen to me if I ate this? And I was like, what fun those? What are you talking about?
And now with those particular meats and the nitrates, we know that barbecuing, which is how many people fix things, that char on there, and then you add alcohol, you have a real carcinogenic right there.
No way. Tell me more
Mhm.
about this.
They've done quite a bit of looking at how meats are prepared, and that particularly things that have been charred
Uh-huh.
increase the carcinogenic effect, and especially when it's been prepared with alcohol. And that's kind of barbecuing and alcohol really kind of seem to go together for a lot of people,
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Going into that, I really started looking at anti-inflammatory diets because
Mm-hmm.
I'm always trying to be as healthy as possible, just because both my parents passed from heart-related diseases. So I'm always like, okay, how can I preserve myself? I mean, I freaking love pizza, and growing up on those poverty foods, my taste buds
Mm-hmm.
are like refined. They're acclimated
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
to these foods. Like, ooh, like, do I want a salad or do I want a pizza? Right? Like, my up here is like, let's eat that pizza, but in my heart, I'm like, we need to eat that salad. But so if we go to anti-inflammatory, I did really notice as I'm aging that when I eat something that's totally terrible, like I can feel it in my joints, which when I was younger, I never felt that before.
Right. Yeah. You ate pizza before and it was no problem, right? And now
Yes.
you're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have had so much of that. There's been a lot of information coming out on the anti-inflammatory diet. And some people eat them and feel like they have benefit, and other people, say no, not so much. But I think we know now for nutrition that increasing plant-based foods in our diet helps us mentally, physically, cardiovascularly, our joints. There's been so many benefits to plant based. And I don't think that necessarily rules out eating meat.
Mhm.
But again, it has to go back with meat and the style of farming, how it's been processed, and what we're doing with it. So those things, there's a big difference between a grass fed beef and corn or meal, corn fed beef. Their fat profile is completely different. So it's the long chain fatty acids that increase our risk for cardiovascular disease, particularly by increasing the LDL or low lipodensity protein. And that's the LDL part of the cholesterol. So we know that the shorter chain and the medium chain fatty acids do not have that same risk. So when they've made these big arching statements that, beef is bad, or dairy is bad, that they were taking things out of context instead of really looking at the profile of the food. And so now that's starting to change some of the message. That's why a plant-based diet with some animal-based proteins that have been farmed correctly, fed correctly, and then processed correctly, they really can pair together. We don't have to have one or the other.
Oh my gosh, you are blowing my mind right now. I had no idea. That is just like fascinating. I did one day, I was sitting home on a Saturday and I think the TV was on, and then this documentary about beef was on, and it was like the grass-fed beef. And then it was like they were showing you how they process their little farm. It was a small scale farm.
Mm-hmm.
And he showed the steak and they dry age it and all this stuff. But the steaks were just like so dark. It was like a liver. It was just so
Yes.
lean. And then
Mm-hmm.
like now if you look at the regular industry beef, it was just like
Mm-hmm.
this hyped up, all marbled. And he's like, you don't really want that. And it was
Mm-hmm.
like, wow, that's really interesting because I have done vegan vegetarian for quite a few years just because of, like I said, my parents. I want to make sure. More recently I've been starting to eat meat again, but more like chicken. But yeah, I didn't know that. That's a really great way to think about eating meat.
And the problem with that, unfortunately, is then access. Who can afford, right? My
Yeah.
husband and I do pay for a beef shipment that we get twice a year from a local farmer here. And the meat absolutely tastes 100% different, but
No
it's not
way.
taste. It's actually the nutrient profile, but it's expensive. And that becomes a barrier for people who can't afford that. So again, we're back kind of into another cycle again. People that can afford traditionally processed, beef that's been raised on grain. Well, that is different than grass fed, than meat that's been processed differently.
Wow, I feel like we could talk about this all day because I've heard I've heard a friend, I think it was a friend of a friend. I was like in a conversation, but I wasn't part of the conversation. And it was like I was sitting at the table and somebody was saying how they go with their neighbors in on a cow.
Oh
And then
yeah.
yeah, so they split the cost because I think they said it was like 1,500 for the cow and then they
Mm-hmm.
all split it. And then it lasts them like a year. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah. So I was like, well, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah. So again, access now becomes an issue. Now you have to know where to get your cow that has been grass fed, right?
Yes.
And then you have to have someone who knows how to dress it out, that you're
Uh-huh.
going to take it, who does all the processing for you. And
Yes.
so that the cost of that adds up very quickly. And
Yeah.
then, there's other meat that's been processed so cheaply, it's really easy to go into Food for Less and buy the cheapest ground beef that's available. And
Yeah.
many families have to do that. So where does the balance come? What we need help with this access to food.
Yes, we do. So my birthday's coming up and I was trying to plan this fancy dinner. It's not working out, but I was trying to find bison and somebody said Oneida Farm, the Oneida tribe, they have a bison farm, but it was really reasonable. It was bison. So, but again, I don't know how they raised them. I don't really know what they're feeding them.
I would think that if they're particularly targeting bison, that they're probably doing some sustainable farming practices. And so I would check up on that. But if it's a one-time dinner, what it depends. Depends on where you want to spend your money and who you want to support.
Yeah, exactly. That's another point too, right? Is like
Yeah.
now growing up super poor, not really having many choices, and now it's like, oh wait, now that I've worked so many years and am able to afford things, that is the other thing. Where do I want to spend? Because I'm always saying shop local, support, small business.
Mhm.
So that's a great point too.
And then we stop by Starbucks and get a drink.
Oh my God. I know that's what I have, but I normally do not drink Starbucks. I just happen to be right in the area. But don't worry, I do not. I'm gonna go on record. I do not support Starbucks. I do shop local.
Good. We have some really good local coffee shops here where I'm at too on the
Right?
Central Coast.
Yes. Because that's the other thing too. My husband drinks black coffee with nothing in it. Just like old school, like my dad was like total cowboy coffee drinking, coffee all day, just black coffee. So my husband drinks black coffee and his coworker, he was like, "Oh, let's go to Starbucks because it was like near them or something." But his coworker got like these frappuccinos, like the biggest thing ever. And then he was just like wired up from all the sugar. It was so funny. But I'm told they're terrible for you.
And I didn't, I've had one Dutch Bros coffee in my entire life, and that thing was so sweet. I couldn't even drink it. I threw it away. I'm like, well, that's a real waste of money.
Yes, even them, yeah. I was like, I got that golden eagle or something like that. Trying to be all sick.
Oh,
No, I'm just kidding. But
that's, that's interesting that you say that because a patient of mine, that was her drink. And I'm like, let's just go look at the nutrition profile on this thing. The sugar was insane.
I bet. Oh my gosh. Yes. So speaking of sugars, white sugars, and then we have let's switch to traditional foods. One of the things that I like to promote is like French fries. I know they're terrible for you, but I'm like, they're based on potatoes, which potatoes,
Yeah.
well, they're from native indigenous people. They were grown in the Amazon, I believe, or Peru. And then through records, they were found in Mohawk territory. So that just showed the trade route. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, so like pumpkins, potatoes, and I think those are all like really good.
Fall into that probiotic category,
No way.
right? A lot of those starches do. Yeah.
Oh,
So it is interesting. And when you talk about a lot of traditional foods, we do talk about, corn and potatoes and things like that. And I like how you mentioned the trade route. You know, we didn't start with okra here. Okra started in Africa and came here.
Yeah.
So it is interesting to see when people try to include more of an indigenous diet,
Yeah.
and then the access again to those foods. Where are we getting those foods and how are they being grown and who's growing them?
Yeah.
Not many people can go to a shop at Whole Foods, on their weekly shopping trip. That's very
Yes.
expensive.
Yeah. Right. Especially right now, the grocery, like $50. I bought like four things.
I know. Guess we're not eating much tonight. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. It all comes back to access and where are you getting it from? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
On TikTok, are you on TikTok? Not everybody's on TikTok, but
No, I am not
okay.
on TikTok.
Okay, so I'm addicted because I'm addicted to learning. So on TikTok, I learned so much. And like I said, there's always somebody trying to sell something or like here's the latest exercise. And one of the things too I'm trying to learn is intuitive eating.
Oh
Uh
yeah.
yeah, which I'm still because it's like, am I hungry here or am I hungry here? Kind of thing. So back and forth.
So mindful eating, intuitive eating, that's a big area of nutrition that has grown over the years. I'm working in bariatrics, so I don't
Huh?
spend a whole bunch of time in that area, but we know that a lot of times people don't know how to put their foods together to feel sustained for very
Yeah.
long.
Okay.
So these ultra processed foods, which are readily available, and in many communities, sometimes some of the predominant foods that are available, where people are shopping at a local, kind of like a 7-Eleven type of store versus a different, again, versus Whole Foods,
Yeah.
but if they're eating a lot of processed foods, you constantly feel hungry. You're truly never satisfied. And so then that's really hard. You're trying to teach someone intuitive eating, but they're eating foods that really don't satisfy you or keep you full very long.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Yeah. And then you see where people kind of take off and they're like, oh, keto. Well, that might not be the best thing depending on how you're doing your keto diet. It's a little scary to me as a dietitian.
Uh-huh.
um, where are they getting their meat? How are they being processed? How are they preparing them? And then what about all the fiber and the phytonutrients that come from produce and from whole grains? That's leaving out whole sections of our diet, which also again go to make up that microbiome.
Oh, very good. Like cycle, like it's all
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. I have tried keto. I've tried like all these different diets. I even was so desperate. I did the GLP-1 because I was just like, oh my God, I was just gaining weight, gaining. And I think it was just personally my observation is just I was kind of unhappy in my work situation. And then that just made me stressy because I was going back on my like upbringing where like in trauma I would rely on foods to make me happy. And then so being in an uncomfortable situation at work, I would be like snack. So the scale was just going up. And then I was like, I gotta get a hold of something. So I went and got Wegovy,
Uh-huh.
prescription for Wegovy, and I did it for probably 8 months, I think, which I did lose, I think, 28 pounds, which is
Mm-hmm.
good. But
Yes, it is.
because I always had like this food noise. When they talk about food noise, I didn't know what they were talking about until I took that
Mm-hmm.
shot, and then it went away, and I was like, wow, I have
Oh,
options now. I can
yes.
stop being like, what do I really want?
Mm-hmm.
But the downside was, as an artist and creative, I feel like it stifled that too. I
Oh,
wasn't as motivated to um create and like, I don't know, it kind of made me feel a little bit depressed.
well, there's some research that, that it kind of supports that. That's interesting that you say that. It's not as common as we think it is. A lot of people, a couple of things, so much stuff you just said that I'm like, is GLP-1s aren't new. And people
Really?
really do know. I taught my first GLP-1 to a patient at community health centers in 2006. and it was the products called Bidurian and Byetta.
No
So they've
way.
been around a long time. They really did come on the market in 2005, and they were groundbreaking drugs then, but even more so now because then they were produced by Novo Nordisk and really only for the treatment for type 2 diabetes and blood glucose control. But over time, and those are off the market now, not because of a health risk issue, unlike many other diet medications or anti-obesity medications, also called nutrient stimulated hormone meds. They have a bunch of different acronyms, but some of those were taken off the market, like Meridia and Belvique, because of heart issues. So those were taken off for safety. Bidurian and Byetta were not taken off for safety. They were taken off because of production costs, which is still
Oh,
an issue.
yes.
And then around 2013 or so, both Novo Nordisk and Lilly, which are both huge drug companies, so I
Mhm.
have lots of thoughts about them, but they did quite a few and still ongoing research studies called the Surmount trial. And they petitioned the FDA to look at using the GLP-1s that they were using for type 2 diabetes for blood glucose control, using them in higher doses for weight loss, particularly to target obesity. And that's when those medications started being approved and moved onto the market. So, for example, Novo Nordisk, their two diabetes medications are Victoza and Ozempic.
Okay.
And Novo Nordisk, those two drugs marketed for weight are Saxenda and the Wegovy that you were speaking about just now.
Okay.
And the Saxenda and the Victoza are a GLP-1 called liraglutide. And the Ozempic and the Wegovy are a GLP-1 called semaglutide.
Okay.
And then Lilly's not going to let Novo Nordisk have all the money. So they have their products that have come out, and they're newer in there because they combined a GLP-1 with a GIP. Those are gut hormones. So they mimic our
To the
natural gut
gut.
hormones. Yes.
Okay.
And so under Lilly, they have tirzepatide, which is under diabetes, it's marketed as Manjaro, and for obesity or weight loss, it's marketed as Zepbound. So these medications, they really have changed. You saw what it felt like to take that medication and not have that food chatter or food noise.
Yeah.
It's truly amazing. For
Yeah.
those of us that have suffered with that, you know, the feedback that I get from patients, my own experience with them has been quite amazing, because then I look at people who really never struggled with obesity as a disease, or chronic overweight, where that food is such a big issue in
Uh-huh.
their life, with those people that really aren't thinking about what's the next two things that they're going to eat while they're eating their breakfast.
Yes,
You know,
that was
yeah.
me. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do
Yeah, and
we eat?
yeah, so it's a relief for people that do have that food noise and food chatter. It really does help. But the problem is that when they're prescribed and patients aren't educated, that is a big problem. The lack of education then turns these medications into something that becomes a social media wave. And
Uh-huh.
so now, not only are you getting commercials on TV, you're getting commercials on social media. And so then the increase of requesting these medications go up. And then when there are negative side effects to medications or manageable side effects, and then when they're not managed, then all the negative publicity comes out. And you hear the things where people are tearing other people down, Ozempic face, Ozempic
Yes.
butt, Ozempic body, you
Uh-huh.
know, and it's sad because these medications really can be used well, and especially if it's paired with really good education. And I know a lot of dietitians were like, oh, what's going to be my role if these medications are helping people lose weight? Your role is to help people use the medications appropriately.
That is
I
so
have
good.
I have different so I'm not a federally qualified healthcare facility now. Now I'm at an at-profit place, and I'm like, wow, this is different. It's all about the business. We do serve still our, what here locally, what's called our SynCal or our Medi-Cal population, which tends to be my favorite population to work with. I've done this for the majority of my career.
Uh-huh.
And when these insurance companies make their requirements for people to have bariatric surgery, they're not all the same. Some people, they need to have 2 visits with me and then they're off to have surgery. And other insurance companies, I'm going to stay nameless,
Yeah, yeah.
um, require 12. So
Wow.
there's some happy medium between 2 and 12.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but I do know that my patients that have had the 12 visits, if they're using a GLP-1, many of them have said to me, Andrew, you've taught me more about my medication and how to get the best benefits from it than my own providing doctor. I can't prescribe it. They prescribe it, but
Yeah.
they don't have, I don't know whether I know they have knowledge to teach their patients, but do they have the time? You know,
Yeah, yeah.
it's not like I'm given a whole bunch of time. I don't want to mislead you. I'm not,
No,
but
but
probably more than
still.
the doctor.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that just shows it's coming from your heart, which is amazing. And yeah, that's your goal, your career, your passion, you know. So
Yes, very
I
passionate about it.
I feel like we could go on and on and on, but I don't want to keep you all day. So let's do some quick rapid fire questions. So what is your favorite recipe to make?
After we talked about all those good things,
I know.
I do have to tell you, I still really like fried tacos. These are just one of I grew up on them.
Uh-huh.
So when I say recipe, it's not really any particular recipe. There's some things that I do different now than that I grew up with, but I add a lot more produce
Okay,
to,
yeah.
right? So a lot more veggies to the whole meal. And then of course my husband and I, we use the grass-fed beef from where we are. So they're changed a little bit, but they're still traditional and I love them. That's probably one of my favorite foods. I get excited when it's taco night.
I know, right? Me too. Same,
Mhm.
same.
And
Okay.
then I was just going to say one other little thing, and that is I've gotten on this little hook of really liking Asian noodles and just throwing in all these veggies.
Uh-huh.
That's been another night that I love coming home for that meal. I look forward to it, and I do think about it in the day.
Oh my gosh, I love Asian food too. It is so good. Okay, so what is your favorite app that you're using, that your go-to?
That's interesting that you say that. And I laughed when I saw the question. I'm like, oh, if she only knew how I'm not so savvy. So I use this app with my patients, and it's called Baritastic. And Baritastic is a way for me to help my patients not only log their food and track their macros,
Uh-huh.
but also to remind them to drink water and to move and to take their vitamins. So
No
it's kind of
way.
very all inclusive. I really like that app.
What is it called? Berry?
Baritastic.
Oh, wow.
I'll spell it.
Oh,
Baritastic. Baritastic.
wow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, people, go down and get that berry tastic because it sounds really good.
It
Like
is a great little app. And
yeah.
you don't have to have had bariatric surgery to use the app.
Uh-huh.
Many people do take other supplements in their diet. We all need water. We all need movement. And
Yes,
anybody who wants to track their macros, it does that as well.
that's awesome because was doing a lot of sitting at work, and then I saw
Mm-hmm.
this study that said, oh, if you get up every 30 minutes and then take a walk or do movement, it's better for you. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think that would be beneficial because sometimes you get so caught up, the time
Yes.
just flies by, you know?
They coined a cute little term, and it's something like physical activity snack bites.
Oh, cute. I like
Mm-hmm.
that.
And
Okay,
it's
oh, okay, last question. Music streaming app, or what is your go-to song to pump you up for the day?
I also giggled at this question too. I am absolutely dating myself in every way. I listen to Amazon Prime. That is
Okay,
where I get my music.
yeah.
And I'm a Stevie Nicks girl. She calms my soul. She pumps my soul. I just I love her. So if I'm getting ready, if I'm doing anything, it's Stevie Nicks on and I could listen all day.
Oh my God. Yes, me too. I saw her a couple years ago and I was just like, I'm not a crier either, but I was just,
Ah,
oh my God.
yeah.
I was that person. I was like, wait a second.
Her music is so heartfelt.
Yes, yes,
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
good. Well, Andrea, I just so much appreciate your time and all the wisdom that you've shared with us. I definitely would like to have you back in the future to share your story, but maybe to do a part two of nutrition if you want to. But
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would love that, Tiffany. And I'm going to warn you now to share my family history story. I'm sure I will be crying because I do every time. I told my sister, sometimes I just have to take a break from thinking about that
mhm,
because it breaks my heart and I can't
yes.
help it. As I was prepping yesterday, I'm over there with tears streaming down my eyes, and I'm like, geez. And my sister says, it is our history though. And so
And I think
we
the telling
grow.
of it is healing, you know. So
Mhm.
that's why
Absolutely.
I want to hear it. So, okay,
Okay.
Andrea, thank you so much. You have an amazing day.
Thank you, Tiffany. Love you.
Love you.